NFL fans believe that we need a quarterback salary cap to counteract the overinflated quarterback market. A few days ago, I asked you guys, should the QB salary cap be implemented? And surprisingly, 72% of you guys said yes and 28% of you guys said no. And I was extremely surprised because this is an incredibly stupid idea. If you have a problem with what these quarterbacks are making as an owner, guess what? Nobody's forcing you to pay your quarterback market value. Nobody forced the New York Giants ownership to give Daniel Jones $40 million a year. Miss me with that whole, they had to pay him that, JT. That's what the going rate was for quarterbacks. BS. If Daniel Jones was a free agent, you really are trying to tell me that there were other teams that were looking to pay him that much a year or more? Tua Tagovailoa, there are not going to be too many teams that are willing to pay and make him the highest paid quarterback or one of the highest paid quarterbacks with the fact that he hasn't won a playoff game, he doesn't show up in big games. A lot of these arguments for implementing a salary cap for quarterbacks comes from the idea that everybody should be able to have a franchise quarterback and keep their good players along with them. That's not how life works. You can't eat your cake. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Patrick Mahomes signed one of the biggest deals in NFL history at the time, and that came with the cost. They had to trade away Tyreek Hill. And what did they still manage to do? Win a Super Bowl. Why? Because they have Patrick Mahomes. Well, everybody isn't Patrick Mahomes, JT. What about Lamar Jackson? He's also one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. And you know who has the second best win-loss record behind Mahomes? Lamar. Why? Because he's able to do more with less. Joe Burrow, tied for being the highest paid QB in the league. Why? Because he was able to take the Cincinnati Bengals to the Super Bowl with one of the worst offensive lines to ever appear in the championship game. He's the only quarterback in league history to win the postseason game, being sacked 10 times or more. If you're going to be one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the game, you can't expect to have a complete team. That's why you get that kind of money, because you can still win despite not having everything around you in the ideal situation to win. Elite quarterbacks elevate their supporting cast and they can overcome limitations. This is the problem that you face when you overpay guys like Dak Prescott and Tua. They're not good enough to elevate their team, and they're only as good as the talent that they have around you, which is why it would make more sense to either trade them away for some draft capital, or you let them hit free agency and use that money that you would have given them to allocate the other positions and have more flexibility when it comes to your salary cap. And if you have to downgrade at the position, or you got to go with a cheaper option, or let's say you have to draft a guy, it still allows you the opportunity to win, because instead of allocating 20%, 25% of your salary cap on a quarterback that's not good enough to elevate a team, you can space that money out at other positions. You remember when Seattle traded away Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos? They got a boatload of draft picks. They took that draft capital from that trade. They flipped it into Devon Witherspoon, Bonye Mafe, and a bunch of other good players. And Seattle was really close to being a Super Bowl contender. Geno Smith gave them really good quarterback play his first year as a starter down there in Seattle in replace of Russell Wilson. That's the prime example why you don't overpay for quarterbacks who are not good enough to elevate the team. Or that's why you don't overpay for a quarterback that you don't believe is worth the money. Everybody can't have an elite quarterback. If you have to let a guy walk away, somebody else is going to be willing to pay them what they're worth. But there are also going to be teams that are not going to be willing to overpay. If your whole argument for implementing a quarterback salary cap in the National Football League is because you got to find a way to keep these quarterbacks from sucking these teams dry for all their money, the salary cap goes up every year. The NFL gets more revenue on a yearly basis, which is why these contracts continue to increase. If you want these quarterbacks to stop breaking the market, either tell your owner to stop overpaying mid-level quarterbacks, or tell the NFL to stop growing and stop getting more revenue. You really think the player association is going to allow the quarterback pay to be capped? That's ridiculous. If you implement a salary cap on the quarterback position, you have to do the same thing for all the other positions. QB isn't the only position that takes a good amount of cap space away. If you have an elite edge rusher or elite left tackle, a high-end Hall of Fame caliber wide receiver like a Justin Jefferson, they're going to take a big chunk away from your salary cap also. It's a strategy that is involved when it comes to winning when you're paying high-level quarterback money. The problem that we have in the NFL is that there are too many mid-level quarterbacks getting overpaid by teams because teams are too okay with having complacency. The problem isn't the rising quarterback market. The problem is you have too many teams who are okay with having good instead of going out there and trying to get great. Did the Cleveland Browns' decision to move on from Baker Mayfield and replace him with Deshaun Watson backfired? Yes, it did. Seattle trading away Russell Wilson to Denver is one of the biggest one-sided trades in the history of the league, but that's the price that you pay when you get aggressive in trying to acquire a franchise-level quarterback. Because when you have that kind of game changer at that position, it increases your chances of being able to win a Super Bowl. But you're not going to be able to win a championship with guys like Tua or Dak Prescott that don't do anything come playoff time. If I was the Miami Dolphins personally, I would tell Tua to go kick rocks, find another team that's willing to bend to his demands and overpay for him, and I would trade him, flipping for a first-round pick, use that draft capital to try to trade up in next year's draft and get either Shedeur Sanders or Carson Beck. You will have the opportunity to reset with the cheaper option at quarterback. Tua has only been as good as what he's been, mainly due to him throwing to Jalen Waddle and Tyreek and benefiting from the play calling of Mike McDaniel. If you don't have a quarterback that can overcome limitations, they shouldn't be getting paid this money. It has nothing to do with implementing a salary cap. Even if you do put a cap on what these quarterbacks are able to make, that's still not going to stop these guys from getting overpaid. Let's say you put the quarterback cap at $55 million a year, right? Are there going to be guys who are good enough to be getting paid $55 million annually and maxing out the cap? No, you still are going to have guys who get overpaid. You're still not solving the problem. You're just putting a stop on the growing market. But if I have a guy like CJ Stroud, he's worth that kind of money and more than that. Tua isn't. If you put a cap or no cap on this thing, there still are going to be massive overpays. That's just part of the NFL. Teams make bad decisions all the time. Your whole argument as a fan is that you don't want your team to be held accountable, or you don't want your team massively overpaying a guy like Tua to the point that it's a detriment to you being able to be a championship contender because you can't be able to afford to pay other guys on your team that have contract extensions going out because you're paying too much money to a dude who isn't worth it. That's not a reason to implement a quarterback salary cap. It's ridiculous and it's a stupid idea. I got a lot of love for you guys, but I was really shocked to see 72% of you guys agreeing that the NFL needs to implement this when the problem isn't the rising quarterback market. The problem is you have dumbass owners who overpaid guys who aren't worth it. We all knew the decision to pay Daniel Jones was terrible. No other team in their right mind on God's ever-loving green earth was going to give Daniel Jones $40 million a year other than the New York Giants. How about you hold your team accountable instead of trying to find ways to bend the rule to still find a way to have a good advantage when it comes to building a championship team? If you don't think your quarterback is worth the money, if you're an owner, guess what you shouldn't do? Overpay him. Duh. I don't get what's so hard to understand about this. What's so hard about having accountability? Everybody can't have great quarterbacks. If you don't have a quarterback that's good enough to win you a Super Bowl, then you shouldn't pay them like they are good enough to do so. What? I do not get the thinking from some people when it comes to this. I think it's pretty clear what you should and shouldn't do when it comes to the quarterback position. It's pretty clear who should be getting paid, who shouldn't be getting paid. Trevor Lawrence, I don't think was an overpay. He's going to ball out this season. You guys don't see it that way, but time will tell. Jordan Love, would you pay him $55, $56 million a year? CJ Stroud, would you pay him $60, $70 a year? If you have to ask yourself if your quarterback is worth that kind of money, it's pretty evident you shouldn't be paying them. The Minnesota Vikings weren't willing to overpay for Kirk Cousins this year. You know what they told him? Good luck. We appreciate everything that you've done for this franchise. We're going to bring in Sam Darnold and we're going to draft J.J. McCarthy and start over with cheaper options. We're not about to allow you to keep finessing us and swindling us overpaying you when you're not giving us the kind of pay or the kind of play that warrants that level of play. These owners don't know how to tell these quarterbacks no. They're too stuck on complacency instead of trying to go out there and get great. And that's why the Dolphins will never win the Super Bowl with Tua Tagovailoa, and they will never go further than the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. There's no need for a quarterback salary cap. What these owners need is some damn glasses and a shot of some common sense. Because it would tell you that Tua shouldn't be getting over $200 million and he shouldn't be getting paid nowhere close to $55 million a season.